Welcome to your Health Reset, where we address the real root causes behind health issues today to get you rapid results on your health journey so you can be who you came here to be, mind, body, and spirit. I'm your host, Sinclair Kennally, survivor of complex chronic illness, expert on resolving root causes, and co-founder of Detox Rejuvenation and Meditation RX. Let's get started. Welcome back to another interview on It Starts in the Gut Summit with me, your host, Sinclair Kennally, and I am joined today by my very good friend, Betty Murray. And I would love for you to introduce yourself because you are so highly qualified to talk about how it all starts in the gut. It's not even funny. So you share all of your special qualifications with us, sweetie?
Okay, I will absolutely do that. First off, I'm a clinical nutritionist. I've been in practice for almost 17 years. I'm also a certified functional medicine practitioner through the Institute for Functional Medicine. I was one of the first 300 certified way back. And so I've been doing this for a very long time. But I think the most important thing for people to know is that I came to this as a second career. Nutrition and fitness was something I was interested in, but I was one of those kids that had a sensitive stomach as a kid, got sick to my stomach all the time. People would let it go. A child was the 70s and 80s where your parents were like, unless a limb fell off, you're okay. And when I got into my 20s, I started having a lot more digestive distress. And I chalked it up to the college eating because my mom was a healthy cook. We didn't eat a lot of junk food. And I'd have these episodes of digestive problems. And it later turned into my late 20s, really getting worse. And I was diagnosed with colitis. And at the time, I was into fitness. So I had been bodybuilding, I'd been eating so clean. I was doing all these things. And the first thing I asked was, could it be something I'm eating? And I remember the gastroenterologist with a barking laugh in my face and said, there is nothing to do with colitis in what you eat. And so I tend to be somewhat sarcastic sometimes. And I was like, well, even a 5-year-old could tell you that something that you eat would have something to do with what's going on in your digestive tract. And so that really led me down this path. And I was already reading about nutrition, so where I spent my free time. And I would bet many people on the subject, this is probably what they do. And so I started going back to nutrition classes and looking into it. And then it was like I found home, and which ended up bringing me to a master's program, a CN program, IFM. So I got certified, master's, and I've since gone in and went because I didn't have enough schooling, went back to get my PhD. And so I've been working in this
It's
field
really
for a
too
while.
bad you're not smart.
So I've been working all these years with women because the big questions I wanted to answer was, why as women do we get so many digestive disorders? So IBS, 3 to 4 times diagnosed in women than men, right? And diagnosed more frequently when you're cycling. So when you go through menopause, it starts to decline rapidly. Why are we diagnosed with autoimmune conditions 10 times to one, male or female to male? And what is it that's going on with our hormones, and why do we experience weight gain and weight loss resistance and all this other things that basically encompass the things that make women crazy and just detract from our quality of life? And so when I went back for my PhD, where I was really focusing my attention was on the intersection between estrogen and the microbiome and the metabolites. So for anybody who doesn't know what that is, the stuff that the microbiome makes that may interfere with our hormones and other things, particularly in IBS, but it has a far-reaching effect across all different sort of disease states. And so that's where my research is actually finalizing right now. So I'm almost done with my PhD. So just got to defend it and get the data and run the study. But it's pretty fascinating. And I think it answers a lot of questions that lead to all the chronic disease and chronic problems that we're dealing with.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's so essential to unpack this for people, especially since we've seen an explosion of chronic illness. And I just wince that you had to go through that with your gastroenterologist because we've heard that so many times from people who come to us in our practice. Like, oh, it has nothing to do with what you're eating. Can't be fixed that way. Don't even worry about it.
And it has
Fascinating.
everything to do with what you're eating.
Yeah. We have so much that we want to cover in a short amount of time today together. I would really love for you to quickly share with us what you think some of the top factors are that are actually throwing off our microbiome from the get-go, and how does that trickle down into what you were talking about with these chronic illness conditions and these chronic autoimmune issues and how that actually intertwines with our hormone expression.
Awesome. So
Just some small stuff.
some small steps. We'll cover some small steps. So the first thing that we need to know is that your microbiome diversity is somewhat set in its perfect case scenario, at least from what the research says today. And looking at the genetics of the microbiome, we are at a best case scenario by the time we're about 4 or 5 years old, right? So that's dependent on whether we were breastfed, whether we were vaginal delivered, whether we had exposure to farm animals and other animals, so we had a greater microbiome diversity, whether we were heavily using hand sanitizer and all that other junk would negatively affect our microbiome. And then probably the biggest ones is antibiotic use, antibiotics in our foods and other things. So when we look at the microbiome, particularly of Westerners, we have a lack of diversity. So if you think of our microbiome like a jungle, we've only got snakes and squirrels and cockroaches and a couple birds left. Whereas other countries that aren't so westernized have this really diverse, rich group of bacteria that help modulate our immune system and inform our immune system. So I think that's first and foremost. We are starting off way below what we should. And then what we have is the things that I alluded to, the increased use of antibiotics in our food, like feedlot animals. We actually use more antibiotics in feedlot animals than actually what get prescribed. And people have no idea about that. So we're getting those in our diet. And actually, they're used to fatten up animals for slaughter. So thank you for all the antibiotics that might be contributing to the weight gain that we see in the last 30 years in the US and in Europe and other places. And so we have that. And then we have the overuse of antibiotics within just medical communities, right? So we have the lack of diversity. Then we have all of the toxins out there in the world that we're getting exposed to. So if you think about it, everything on the planet was organic until the Bronze Age, right? And then really until the industrial age, we had very little inorganic chemicals in our environment. And you could probably answer this better than me, but I think the current number is about 95 something thousand different chemicals that are added, many of which look like and modulate like estrogens, right? They have this endocrine disrupting activity. So not only as women and men do we have these hormones that are circulating, but we have all of these other chemicals that we're exposed to that act that way in the gut. And so when they interact, we have not only our body that has to clear that out through the liver and deal with it on top of our own hormones, but our microbes interact with that. And one of the major things that happens is when we take antibiotics and we take things that disrupt our microbiome, oftentimes the helpful bacteria, the ones that we think about like lactobacillus and bifido, they get wiped out. So think of those as your Labrador retrievers and your tabby cats off the planet. So we lose them, and they're supposed to be about 90% of our microbiome should be in these two major classes. What tends to overgrow are a lot of gram-negative bacteria, which are antibiotic resistant. They're fuzzy and they have this outside that makes it hard for the antibiotics to get in there, and they overgrow. They produce a byproduct. So let's think of it this way. They eat food, they go to the bathroom, and they go to the bathroom in you. So they produce this bathroom byproduct in you called beta-glucuronidase. And beta-glucuronidase affects how we get rid of all those estrogenic compounds. And when that is high in the gut, our body actually redistributes that estrogen or the plasticizers or pesticides and herbicides, organophosphates, and redistributes that back into the bloodstream. And so we have these kind of used up old estrogen like compounds circulating around, and it changes our hormones and it changes our body. So that is a huge problem. And when that happens, it changes what our hormones do, particularly in women, especially when we're cycling. It changes a lot of that.
So beautifully said. What a phenomenal summary of what is going on in the gut right now versus what used to happen and what our ideal design would be. And I love that you're using this metaphor of ecology because so many people end up using war metaphors when we're talking about the body or mechanical metaphors like a body is a car, and nothing could be further from the truth, especially when you're talking about the microbiome and something as complex as hormones. We use the metaphor of your body's basically a sacred rainforest. And if you dump a bunch of poison and you start getting burned out spots, certain species are more susceptible than others to that. And you get weird overgrowths of other ones.
Exactly.
So we're totally on the same page here. So, what do you want people to know that are listening to this and going, I wonder if that's happened to me, or that's absolutely what's happened to me. Now what do I need to know to take charge of this for myself?
So, some of the questions you want to ask if this might be going on for you. So, first off, if you have digestive problems, I can almost guarantee that there is probably alterations. Number one, in your microbiome diversity, guaranteed, no question about it. Or even things like you're reactive to foods. I've been doing this for so long. People are always will come to me and say, "Hey, Betty, I want to test for food sensitivities, food allergies, lectins, you name it." And I'm always like, "Look, we need to do stool testing and some other things because it's the chicken or the egg. Do the food sensitivities now show up because I had digestive function problems and also microbiome diversity problems? And now I've got a leaky gut and all this is happening and the foods are a byproduct of that." So the end result is that if you have any digestive problems, there's something going on in the gut, period, end of sentence. And it's probably functional, microbiome diversity related, and leaky gut, and probably food sensitivities. They probably all cohabitate. It's never just one gun and one bullet. The other thing is if you're a female, I'm going to speak mostly to the females because these are very evident in women. If you have a history of hormone problems, you were diagnosed with PCOS, you've had abnormal periods that are maybe heavy, you've got ovarian cyst, you've got a history of fibroids, you've had endometriosis, infertility, you've had to have an ablation, you've had to have a hysterectomy, there's a high likelihood that there is an interplay between your hormones and these bacterial metabolites like beta-glucuronidase and how your body is actually eating and feeding forward. There's also a huge relationship, or at least it's starting to look this way. We don't have clear pictures of every way that it seems to work, but we know that there's a role of beta glucuronidase and the stuff that the bacteria makes in breast cancer, ovarian cancer, definitely gastrointestinal cancers like colon cancer, and other disease states, colitis, Crohn's. There's a lot of indication that there's abnormalities in these pathways. So if you yourself have that history, that may also be a good indicator. So those are the things that I start to watch for. And truthfully, I look at it. And if you're not feeling well, you probably need to poop in a tray and do a stool test. Just being serious.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah. Not everybody wants to do it, but it is probably one of the more telling tests that we could
Oh,
do.
it's only once. We get our clients digging through their poop because of worms and passing gallstones and stuff. You can get into it. You can get into anything if you think it's going to lead you to greater vibrance. You can
Absolutely.
get right over that aversion. I never thought I'd be talking about poop as much as I do. And now I do it all day long.
I know. I think, unfortunately, the people that come to this movement, often they themselves or someone in their family got very sick. And I'm
Exactly.
hopeful now that people are starting to want to be proactive. And maybe it's not the person that's desperate that wants to look for it, but that people are getting more proactive and just want to take control.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that you're emphasizing that because I think it's so essential for us to be advocates for our own health in this time and not just take your first practitioner's answer at face value for what's possible for you or what's expected or what you have control over.
Definitely.
Especially since this data, like so much of it is just recently emerging and it takes 40 years for data like that to reach mainstream consciousness. We just don't have that kind of time. Like
No.
our people don't want to wait. So,
And oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
And our medical model, for the most part, is not designed to help people be proactive. You have to be your own advocate because you don't get that in a 10-minute visit. You just can't.
Totally agree. And I think one of the things that's holding us back still the most is assuming that because you live in a developed country, but it's US or Europe or Australia or New Zealand, that this is just handled for you, that this is all thought through for you. The food standards from growing the crops to your farm animals are being fed to the slaughter processes to the preservatives that are legal and can still considered food, even though they are fundamentally toxic and anti-life. They're poison, and we're
Totally.
using them for convenience, and we're calling it food. And so, it may not be your fault at all that you don't feel well, but it is your job to fix it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's definitely, in most people's cases, not their fault, but they just don't know that the industry, the world's industries are driven by economy, not ecology, and people.
That's really well said. And especially in the US, the burden is on the consumer to prove that any one of those 95,000 plus chemicals is harmful to our health. It's not, the burden is not on the companies to prove that it's safe to release to the public.
No. And
Hey,
yeah,
we're a lot of fun at parties, guys, just so you know.
we can be fun every when we need to
We
be.
think we're fun.
That is true. That is true.
Want to talk about stones? You want to talk about poop? You want to talk about worms? You want to talk about chemicals?
Let's do this.
Okay, so Betty, because you are such a highly skilled clinician and because you're steeped in the data right now, especially the newly emerging data, I would love for you to speak to our summit junkies, our gluten free yogis who still feel like crap. They've done every elimination diet. They have feel like they have total control and understanding of what the inflammatory foods are. They've detoxed their personal care years ago. They've detoxed their home care stuff. What should they be paying attention to next? What can they do to interview their next practitioner or criteria that they can use? Help them with some nuggets here.
Right. So if you've gone through all of that, like you've cleaned up everything that you can possibly imagine. So I first and foremost, I think it's important to explore the microbiome because it's not so much what you ate, it's what you ate that your microbiome assimilated and did things with and what you get
Mm,
from it. So I think to me that's absolutely vital. And it's time to start pulling apart the internal chemistry of the body because some of it is not so much even what you've been exposed to recently. It might have been what you've been exposed to 20 years ago. Those things, most of the toxins are lipophilic, so they hang out in the fat cells. And if you're struggling with weight loss and you can't get rid of it, sometimes it's because your body's, oh no, that's 3 Mile Island. And I need to keep that in the fat cell because it's disgusting and I can't get rid of it. So even if you're doing all those things, it is time to dig deeper and look into the chemistry of the body, the microbiome, the digestive function, and all these other things because there's uniqueness there. The other part is we are genetically unique. 95% of our genes are identical, right? What makes a human? But when we look at those individual markers that distinguish how we metabolize food, how we detoxify toxins, how we make energy inside the cell, and all of those different little chemical changes, there's wide variability within the population. And much of it is because our ancestors, wherever we hailed from, whether we were Northern European or from Africa or Indochina, had different environmental pressures because of the environment. And there is uniqueness in that. So you could be doing all the right things, reading the right blogs, taking the right supplements, but they may not be right for you,
mm,
and your epigenetics, what's happening right here, right now. So if you're looking at reaching out and trying to find a practitioner, number one, I always recommend a little bit of an interview because functional medicine is like saying, I sell ice cream. I can have 1,000 flavors of ice cream. And functional medicine is a broad, overreaching way of looking at systems biology and understanding the biology at a 30,000-foot view and then drilling down to find root cause. But it does not mean that everybody that does functional medicine has 100% same skill sets. But unfortunately, people aren't sure of that. They don't know, and they may end up with a practitioner that cannot help them because they may not have the depth in what they need. So if you're working with somebody, you need to know that they're working on the area that you most dominantly need help in. Because usually once we fix things, particularly the gut, we joke that the gut is where ground zero, it's where it all happens. And many times other things miraculously get better when we fix the gut. But gut is important, but if you're having other things like hormonal problems, weight loss problems, perimenopause, menopause, whatever that is, you want to make sure that person's steeped in both. So you want to do a little bit of an interview and find that right expert. And you'll get there faster if you work with somebody. It's not what, it's who. What I do find is a lot of people will just dig in and probably listen to summits and order tests. But unless you have somebody that can really pull that 30,000-foot view, Jackson Pollock painting for any art fans in there, and sees the pattern within the crazy paint, if you don't have somebody that can help pull that together for you, you're playing whack-a-mole. Or in some ways, you may be playing green medicine. Or I'm taking this one supplement for this one marker and this one supplement for this marker, but combined total, because you can't see the forest through the trees, you're missing the picture completely. So I think that's vital. I know for me, that was important. And I had to learn a lot on my own, but I did reach out and have experts that I worked with. So I think those are like the big things. Don't tolerate feeling bad. I feel better today at 52 than I did at 32. And that's a testament to working through this process and getting a handle on it and iterative, right? Usually it's like a layer and then another layer and then another layer, but there's layers that can get better. We don't stop because we're getting older.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you just said. It's not to scare people, but most of the people in our practice that come to us feel worse after working with a functional medicine practitioner whose approach was not right for them. And they're
Yeah.
like, now what do I do?
Yeah.
So it's too big an umbrella. It's not enough to say that. It's not a good enough criteria, especially at this point when we know we can do better. And I really want for everybody listening to work with a practitioner who is obsessed about the order with which to unpack what is needed. So, everything that Betty is saying about absorption, this is essential to understand. It doesn't matter what you add in if your body can't absorb it. Not only is it expensive pee, but it's also exhausting for your body, right?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Definitely.
For that reason, we always obsess about early support like mitochondria health and absorption so that when we go to work with the deeper layers, you have that support on board. You don't want to add furniture to a burning house.
No, exactly, exactly. And you don't want to clean out the attic when the garage is full. Like you got to do it in the right order. And a lot of people don't. And it makes people worse, not better. I agree. I see a lot of people that have been down the road many times and just aren't getting to the right answer.
Yeah. So one of the things I want to ask you about today is from our work that we obsess about liver function, is it's so often overlooked. Liver values can look normal until the liver is dipped to approximately like 60% efficiency. It's such a hard little worker or big worker. It's our biggest organ after the skin.
Yeah.
But since you are so well versed in the gut and hormone axis, we'll call it just for brevity's sake, what would you tell people about how to think about their liver health within that context?
Like you said, the liver, most people think of it as a filter, like a car or oil filter. And yes, it does help us detoxify, right? So it helps us package things up. So think of that as wrapping things up. And it's multi steps, so multi layers of wrapping things up to get it to the exit route. And in many cases, that exit route is going to go through the stool and be bound to bile and the fiber and things like that and go out with the stool. And the liver is also an endocrine gland. So it produces hormones. It's vital to our function. And often a lot of the things that we're dealing with, whether it's weight gain that won't come off or it's blood sugar problems, insulin problems, estrogen problems, they harbor in the liver because the liver, as it's so hardworking and so busy, is often the last one to pay attention. So, for instance, it's one of the first ones to become insulin resistant as an organ and one of the last to recognize that it doesn't need to be anymore. So, there's that intersection. There's a huge intersection in all your hormones and the liver. The other part is if I have bacteria producing things like beta-glucuronidase, the way that all those estrogen like compounds get back into the bloodstream is when the bacteria produce that beta-glucuronidase P, that takes I like crass examples. It makes it work for people. Yeah, basically what happens is it starts pulling the wrappers off the estrogen compounds that you have and allow it to get recirculated through the liver back into the blood supply, right? So it has a huge impact. So you can't ignore the liver while fixing the gut, and you can't fix the gut without addressing the liver.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I know you probably have said this on some of your other summits interviews is we realigned the liver enzyme injury markers, ALP and AST and ALT in whatever the last decade and made them higher because people were fatter and had more disease state. So instead of saying, hey, we've got a problem on our hands, we just moved the goalpost a little bit to make it look less bad. And the truth is, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is going to be one of the leading causes of liver transplant, is assumed to be almost 3 to 5 to 1. So basically, somewhere between 1 in 3 to 1 in 5 people are going to have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease by the time my age group hits 65, and it will cripple the medical system just like diabetes is going to, because we will not have any way to treat these individuals. You only have one liver and transplant's not available.
This is so important to understand because this also disproportionately affects women, right? So,
Mhm.
like you're saying with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, some estimates already place at 25% of the population, and we're seeing that rise so quickly. It's like a hockey stick on the graph, and it's no accident. It's the diet, it's the toxins, it's all of these factors that Betty's already mentioned. And when we look at statistics, like 80% of women over 40 have toxic sluggish bile.
Oh, yeah.
We have got to slow down and look at this and become experts at it. You're speaking my love language right now. Talk to us about female specific factors that women who are listening should be aware of
So looking at female specific factors around liver
for liver
health.
health. Yeah.
So definitely looking at liver enzymes are always important. Looking at your markers of your sex hormones, so things like sex hormone binding globulin, your circulating estrone, estradiol, estriol, which are your three estrogens, looking to see what they are in relationship to your other hormones like progesterone and testosterone, DHEA. Sex hormone binding globulin in particular, which is the kind of taxi cab that drives things around. If it's elevated, that can be a sign. And looking at if a woman is experiencing hormone abnormalities, right? Whether it's adult acne or weird periods or painful periods, or fibroids, all of those things, there's going to be a piece of it that has to do with the body's ability to excrete and get rid of those toxins and those estrogens. And there's an interplay, obviously, with the bacteria. So if a woman's dealing with those things, then the liver is always one of the places you got to start.
I totally agree. It's one of the reasons why our group support training after this summit is called Rapid Liver Reset because it's so overlooked when we're talking about gut health. Everybody's obsessing about the small intestine and, a little bit about the colon, but nobody's talking about how dominant the liver is in the whole digestive experience and how this is really like your gateway to chronic illness if that is really stagnated. And I love that you're really shining a spotlight on these hormone markers because so many women have become hormone replacement therapy literate thanks to Oprah and the talk shows. And it's, I think, such an important step in a conversation about women's health, but it's the first stop for many women. How can I just plug this hole or boost this number so that I can go back to normal instead of it being the last stop after we've done all the groundwork to actually clean things out and get your body self-reliant again.
You're
What would
absolutely, sorry, you're
Yeah, what
absolutely
would you
right.
say to those women right now?
Yeah. So one of the tests that we do a lot of is the urine hormone metabolites. Like, how do you package this stuff up and get it out? And I think it's a travesty and dangerous to some degree to be putting hormones in a woman and or a man without knowing how we wrap all those hormones up and get them to the trash. Because whether it's your own hormones you make, the hormones you ingest and come in contact with, and the xenoestrogens and all that other junk, or the hormones you're administering because you want to feel more sexy, alive, more passionate, more whatever. And not believe me, we do a ton of hormone replacement at my functional medicine center. But we never ever do it without checking to make sure you can get it to the trash can. That's vital. And if anything, you got to clean that up first before you throw them in. But hormones are often where people that are coming into the functional medicine arena, prescribers in particular, that's the thing people are looking for. It's what I would say is one of the easier things to understand, honestly. And that becomes my go to treatment. And people feel better immediately, right? Often.
Right,
And so we do this, but then we don't, as a community, go back and go, let's do our due diligence to make sure everything's working properly.
right,
Because you do maybe run risks of things that you don't want to have happen long term with hormone replacement and your body's ability to get rid of it.
right. So if you get a quick win, awesome, but you might still have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, you might still have IBS or the other side of the coin, chronic constipation, you're not excreting well, you got problems building for the future that are too expensive. You do not want to have to pay that bill.
And some of those hormones, like testosterone and even estrogen, put into a metabolically deranged body where we're insulin resistant, we've got high cortisol because we're burning the candle at both ends because you happen to be female. You do that, and no, you're not going to lose weight. You may possibly gain weight because in many cases, those things are somewhat anabolic, meaning they tell the body to grow. And in somebody that's already got problems with insulin and all these other metabolic hormones, it may end up being worse rather than better. And I see that a lot in my hormone reset group. Somebody's been on hormones and told they would lose weight. And lo and behold, they gained it.
Wow. I think you've given everybody so much to think about today. I hope listeners, I'm sure they can't see why I love you so much. So, what are your top
All
tips that you want to leave people thinking about today?
right. So the top tips. All right. So if you checked off any of those boxes about digestive problems, hormone problems, even if you're menopausal and maybe a lot of your hormone problems are better now, but if you had them, you still have them in different
Mm,
ways, right? Just because your hormone production is petered out doesn't mean there's not something happening under the hood that needs to be addressed. So don't think you're out of the weeds. There's things like bone density and other things that can be affected by these microbial metabolites. I don't even want to go into it. It would take me days. So you need to check that out, right? And those things are not exclusively to women. So if there's guys listening to this, you make sex hormones too. It's not just testosterone. And sometimes low T and all those other things are affected by not only what you're making, but what your microbiome is doing. So hormone problems across the board, we need to look. The other thing is if you have a history of digestive problems, it is not just food sensitivities. It's not food allergies. It's not that I need to create the most intense, limited elimination diet and exist on the most limited number of foods. It means that there is a functional problem with digestion, often related to all of the levels of digestion from the pancreas, the stomach, and hydrochloric acid, and definitely liver bile flow and bile function and bile acid metabolites and how that works. And that you have to address that along with your microbiome and what your microbiome are producing. Because if you're doing one piece of it and you're not getting better, it's because you're not looking at the picture as a whole. So yes, you need to poop in a tray.
asked and
and,
answered.
and I think the other, like I look at whatever somebody has going on, and I don't care how many labels of diagnoses people have. There is always room for improvement and hope. And sometimes, especially in functional medicine, because we're getting super geeky and we're covering all this stuff, people go, oh, it just sounds like overwhelming and I have no hope. The beauty of this is that there's always hope because in order for a person's health to fail, we have to have a tissue fail, an organ to fail, a cell fail, right? So we now know that we know how to start pulling that back. So that means there's always a piece for improvement. Does that mean everybody gets to drop whatever label they have? No, maybe not. But it does mean there's always an opportunity to get better. And when you go out and look for a practitioner, you want to find one that has that level of passion to help you
Mhm.
get to hope and prosperity in your health. Because if they aren't, they probably aren't the right one for you. So
Amen. Hot damn. Yeah, I totally agree. The body is brilliant. You've got to work with a practitioner that believes that wholeheartedly and that is willing to help you unpack and reclaim your own body's ability to heal itself.
yeah.
Period. End of story. Thank you so much for coming on the summit today
Oh,
and
thank you.
sharing your wonderful wisdom with everybody. And please go check out Betty Murray. She's a force of nature, obviously, and she has so much to share with the world. Go follow her now.
Thanks for listening. Go to detoxrejuvenation.com to find the links in the show notes to everything we covered in this episode. Please subscribe, review, and share with other humans who need this precious information. Let's help each other. Until next time, love, Sinclair.